When I was 11 years old, I was sexually abused. And it messed me up in a way that I could not have described until I finally was able to get diagnosed and worked through. Also, I made a joke earlier about having a girl's name, but when I was in second grade, Whitney Houston went big. And so now everyone is making fun of me for having a girl's name.
Welcome to episode 75 of The Real Deal, where real estate meets real life. I am your host, Janine with my co-host, Ryan Hatcher.
What's up, guys?
Our guest today is Whitney, and I am very excited for you all to hear this. I'm actually excited to hear it myself and to kind of hear about your story. I think this will be so fun. We were talking before we got on camera that as it relates to men tend to not be as expressive and vulnerable with the hard stuff of life, whereas us women, we're like open books, we'll share it all, and we actually bond that way, but men don't tend to do that. And so, Whitney, this is going to be so fun because I think we're going to hopefully give permission to all the men out there to be open and vulnerable and be better.
I hope so. And I think one of the ways, or one of the reasons why I'm able to be open and vulnerable, like you said earlier, is maybe because I have a woman's name. Whitney, maybe that's what allows me to be open and honest about what's going on in my life. Yeah, it's just definitely bringing and harnessing that in.
I love it.
So I'm really excited to be here today, and I couldn't be more honored. Thank you for having me.
Well, I even hate the word vulnerable.
Yeah, you do?
Do you?
I hate that word.
All right.
How funny.
As a guy.
Okay, so this is we're gonna go deep, Ryan.
Well, I said too, I'm excited about this subject.
Great.
Yes.
Because I agree 100%. Men need to be able to find some sort of outlet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And here's the thing.
A healthy one.
Thank you. And here's the thing. And I talk about this in my book, which comes out May 6th, by the way.
Can we just plug it right now?
Yeah. So this is the proof copy from Amazon. So it's got that do not resell.
Yes.
But May 6th is when the book comes out.
Men Under Pressure.
Men Under Pressure. It'll be on Amazon, Barnes & Noble.
That is awesome.
And what's it say? A man's guide to what?
A man's guide to reclaiming mental health. So, I don't know where you want me to start.
Well, let's just start at the beginning. Thank you, because we're just already off and running. But let's start at the beginning.
All right.
We want to know, where did you grow up, and kind of how did you get to where you are today to having written a book?
Excellent. I was born and raised here in the Valley in Mesa, Arizona. I'm the sixth of 9 kids.
Awesome.
Hence my desperate need for attention. And ended up, ultimately, my goal when I was 12 years old was to become an orthodontist.
Okay.
I knew that's what I wanted. I love making people smile. I fell in love with smiles, and I thought, what better way to live my life than to create beautiful smiles? So I knew at age 12 to become an orthodontist, that's what I wanted to do. Unbeknownst to me, I was dealing with undiagnosed ADHD, and so that was a much more difficult road for me than others might have found it to be.
Why do you say that?
Because I have ADHD. And so my brain doesn't focus like other people's brains. Right. It's kind of like fireworks going off at random times that you don't know. Like I'll be trying to study science or anything, and I'll be trying to focus, and I've got like flashes going in my brain of different thoughts or ideas, or I'll hear a noise over here, and like it's so hyper attuned to everything going on around it at once that it's hard to get laser focused. It wasn't until after my first year of dental school that I finally got diagnosed with ADHD and got on the medication.
Wow.
That the first time I took the meds, I looked at my wife and I'm like, is this what a normal brain feels like?
Wow.
I could not believe it. Wow. And I could study and focus. It was unbelievable. Anyway.
Well, side note though, because that is a very prevalent problem.
Oh, yes.
And, my 12-year-old, I think I was just talking to somebody about that earlier today. Do I need to go get him diagnosed and get him on medicine? Would that be beneficial? Because it's hard for him. He hates school.
Yeah.
And I get it.
Yeah.
If something is so hard, who's going to want to do that?
Yeah. So that's an interesting question that you bring up. As a parent, you struggle with the idea that your child isn't perfect. And so you think to yourself, if I go and I get my kid tested for ADHD and they have it, well, then I've admitted that there's a weakness there, and now we have to deal with it. Versus if we, like when I grew up, you just ignore it.
Right.
It doesn't exist, right? You just compensate for it. But they have found, studies have shown that those who go undiagnosed and untreated with ADHD have a higher risk for addictive behaviors, self-harm, or getting harmed during risky behavior because they just, they're at risk. And so my recommendation, absolutely get tested. So my oldest son absolutely has ADHD. You know, we discovered that when he was maybe 14 or 15, got him on meds. He went from C's to straight A's and like became just it turned his life around. My daughter, she also has it, and she's brilliant, like brilliant. But she found that when she came home from school, her batteries were completely depleted because she was spending so much energy just being in the moment with all the fireworks going off, that when we finally got her tested, which there are tests where you can sit in front of a computer and it will diagnose you with these special tests. It's amazing now. And now she has the medication. She comes home and she's like, Dad, I feel amazing. I don't feel so run down and want to just cry when I come home from school. It's transformed her. So if you think your kid has ADHD, if you think you have ADHD, it's never too late to get tested and to get on something that will help with that, because it is a real condition that you can't just, work through. I mean, I did, but that's
not just changing your diet.
That's right. That's right. I mean, I was studying. So when I was in dental school, I was studying 4 to 6 hours a day when my classmates were studying maybe 1 to 2 hours a day.
Wow.
Yes.
And they were like, why are you studying so much? I'm like,
doesn't everybody?
And so I ran out of hours in the day, and that's when I decided to finally go get help.
Yeah, because right now in the world that we live in, we're talking about the chemicals and the dyes and all those things in our food, right? I wonder how much that will change.
That's a great question, because they talk about, if you eliminate some things from your diets, how that can make a difference and change. I think that's amazing. I would love to see advances in that, but it's genetic. ADHD is genetic. And so, I mean, hopefully that they'll be able to eradicate some of those symptoms, but in the end, if you've got it, you've got it. It's just like diabetes. Type 1 diabetes, if you're born with it, you have it. And so
that's awesome. Well, thank you. It's a great episode. No, I'm just kidding. No, but so valuable, like that in and of itself, right?
So
you got that resolved.
Got that resolved. Graduated from dental school. Well, I found my sweetheart Margaret in college, tricked her into marrying me, which was the best con job of my life. And then went to dental school in Colorado from 2004 to 2008. And then from 2008 to 2010 was in my orthodontics residency. So 10 and a half years of higher education to become an orthodontist. And I ended up working for a company in Colorado for maybe 6 months, realized I hated that because I didn't like how they treated people. And a best friend of mine from dental school and he's a dentist, I'm the orthodontist, we decided, let's do our own thing. We know what we want, we know what we don't want. We're both from Arizona. Let's come here, start our own company, and just see if we can scale it. And we decided to have orthodontics and dental in the same office and have 3 dentists and 1 orthodontist per office and be open from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Saturday and just provide low-cost, high-quality dental and orthodontic care for the masses. So we started our company in 2011. It's called Risas Dental and Braces. We now have 27 locations in 4 different states. Wow. And I talk about that here in the book a little bit, but I, in 5 years, was in 14 different orthodontic practices.
Wow.
And it destroyed me. It really did.
Just the busyness?
In busyness, and because I was chasing ghosts that I didn't realize I was chasing.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
All right, so we're about to go a little bit deeper here. Now, you don't like the word vulnerable, but I'm about to just take this a little bit, okay?
Let's do it.
When I was 11 years old, I was sexually abused. And it messed me up in a way that I could not have described until I finally was able to get diagnosed and worked through. Also, I made a joke earlier about having a girl's name, but when I was in 2nd grade, Whitney Houston went big. And so now everyone was making fun of me for having a girl's name. I was named after Whitney, Idaho, where my ancestors are from, but anyway, it became a girl's name. So I was getting bullied quite a bit, super low self-esteem, and then I was then ripe to be essentially, victimized and was sexually abused for about a year. And what happens when you are abused like that is you take on the shame of your assailant, or your predator, or your your abuser. So I developed what's called toxic shame, which means that I hated myself and I thought that I was worthless. And here I am, just a kid, right? So I took on toxic shame, and then I also developed what codependency. So what codependency is I value, the way that I see myself is positive only if you see me positively. So what that means is that I will do anything in my power to make sure that you're good. Because if you're good, then I'm good. And if you're not good, I'm not good. And I'm going to do whatever I can to make you good. And it is a destructive cycle that will just wear you down. So here I am, a kid, toxic shame, codependency. And because I have no self-esteem at this point, the only way that I feel like I am worth anything is through my achievements. So I begin to achieve. Student council president, student body president, class clown, prom or homecoming king. You know, I did everything. I was everything. And all of it was to feel worthwhile, you know, that I had worth, because I didn't. So then, as I progress in my schooling and in my career, I continue to chase those accolades, because to me, that is where my self-worth is. And I'm always chasing the next accolade, the next trophy, the next feather in my cap. And the problem with that is there's only so much that the human body and mind can withstand before it begins to shut down. And since I was running from my demons, I couldn't stop. I developed workaholism, which means that I would put work above everything else, my family, everything else.
Can we pause on that real quick? Because I think that's a important one, especially when there's trauma or things that you're trying to avoid, to pour yourself into work.
Yes.
Right? Because there's fulfillment, there's accolades, there's accomplishment, it's rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what are some, I just want to pause there for a second.
No, happy to pause.
Somebody could be listening and thinking, I'm struggling with that. What are some warning signs that you're a workaholic and maybe it's misplaced issues?
Those are great questions. So 9 times out of 10, if you're dealing with some sort of addiction, it's because you have trauma in your past that is making itself manifest. And you're trying to either cope with that or soothe it or fill that hole in some way. For me, it was workaholism. For others, it could be alcoholism, drug addiction, porn, sex addiction, gaming, all sorts of different things. But if you have something in your life that you feel is pushing the balance off kilter, then that's a good warning sign.
That's great.
Now, here's another shameless plug, but I don't think it's shameless. Knowing that question would come up. In the back of my book, I have self-administered tests that you can do that are, you know, do I have codependency? Do I have anxiety? Do I have depression? Do I have toxic shame? And all of these things are in here that you can kind of take the test and see, maybe I do have something to do with that. And then it encourages you to then seek a mental health care professional, a medical professional to help you with that, because a lot of people are walking around not knowing that they're dealing with these things.
I remember when I was in college, somebody that I grew up with, very, very close to, he said that he never would have believed that depression was real until he experienced a 6-month little stint. And he said it was very minor compared to most that he had seen or heard of. But that was kind of eye-opening for me too, because I've never experienced what I would call depression, like other people describe it. But I also think that we all have different types of trauma. We don't even know it.
Correct.
And even if you lived a good life and you had a great childhood.
That's right. So, I've got like 6 directions I could head. No, you're fine. You're fine, but so you brought something up just now, that your buddy fell into a stent of depression, and now he can empathize what that is. Beforehand, he probably had the insight or the feeling of, if you have depression,
Tough it up.
Rub some dirt on it, just set your alarm, make it happen. Ryan, you have children? Can I ask you, what is it like to be pregnant and to give birth to a child? Give me your best insights on that.
That's tough.
You can't. as hard as you think that you might be able to give me insights
I
on that.
witnessed it.
Yeah.
But that's about it.
But that's it, right? Someone who hasn't experienced it can't fully understand its depths and all of the different nuances. Having experienced deep depression myself, severe anxiety and panic disorders, I can tell you exactly what those things feel like, and it's just terrible. I can't tell you what it's like to have a baby, you know, even though I've got a girl's name. So depression, so let's go back to the story. So here I am, I'm a workaholic. I am opening practices in Phoenix, in Denver. I'm a clergy for my congregation. I'm a new father. I am doing everything. I'm spinning all the plates all the time. And I just continue to deplete myself. And over time, what happens is I develop adrenal fatigue. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but there's two little glands that sit on top of your kidneys called your adrenals. And they're responsible for your cortisol, your adrenaline, essentially your fight or flight response. And as I was always dealing with the anxiety and the pressure and the undiagnosed PTSD that I was suffering with, that we'll talk about in a second if there's time, my adrenals started to give out. And that's when depression really started to hit me. And I felt like it just kind of rolled in like a thick fog. And then the colors of my world turned into gray. And I just found myself emotionless. And it was brutal. And I thought at first, maybe it's just low testosterone. So I went and I got my testosterone checked. The first doctor that I went to, my family doctor, I said, I think my testosterone is low because my brother just got checked and his was critically
You're
low.
how old at this time?
I was 35.
Okay, which is about the time it's
Yeah.
affected, right?
Next month I turn 45. So that'll kind of give you the idea. So I go and I see him and he looks at my arms and he says, oh no, you have hair on your arms. You're fine. You don't have any issues with your testosterone. Well, what?
Interesting, yeah.
Just do the blood test,
Yeah,
bro. Like, what's
yeah.
the issue here, right? So I bailed on him and I went and I saw a naturopath and he did a full blood panel on me. And it turns out it wasn't just my testosterone that was low. Everything was low. Cortisol, neurotransmitters weren't functioning. Like, it was crazy. So anyway, he starts getting me put back together.
But that's because, and to that point, stress
Yes.
has a physical
100%.
effect
Yes.
on us. Our bodies
Absolutely.
can only handle so much for so long.
Exactly. It wears you down. It wears you down. And so I finally started to feel a little bit better because I was getting testosterone therapy and like all these different things, and that was helping, but I could still feel like I was trapped behind a glass and I couldn't find Whitney anymore. So I ended up going to see a psychiatrist. So I was seeing a therapist for a while. She convinced me to see a psychiatrist. I didn't want to because I felt like if I took meds, I was weak. You know, if I kind of grew up in the idea that if you're on medication for something that, you know, then you're just,
Or if you're seeing a counselor for anything.
yeah, you're worthless, you know, like man up, bro.
Yeah.
Right? I was manning up by getting better. And one of the things that I talk about that's most crucial is I hear people say, I would do anything for my family. I would die for my family. The question is, would you be willing to do what you can to live for your family, to even heal for your family? That is the true mark of willingness to sacrifice for who you love.
I love that, Whitney, because that is the true test of love, right? Are you willing to be healthy?
Yeah.
To do what it takes to get right
That's
so that
right.
you can love your family well.
Thank you. Yes, and as men, and I talk about the pressures that men face to be providers, to be protectors, and how we're not allowed to mention that we're struggling. Because as soon as you show a chink in your armor, well, then now the world is against you.
Yeah.
You said you don't like the word vulnerable, and that's because as soon as a man shows that he's vulnerable, then the wolves attack. And so in my book, I talk about how to circumvent that and how to tear down those stigmas. But as I was killing myself, literally killing myself in my work and everything else, ignoring and blowing past all the red flags, the depression came in, the anxiety was ramping up. One day I was treating a patient in one of my offices, and it was just, I was dealing with everything like normal, and I fell out of my chair onto the floor. And I thought, what in the world just happened? And I stand up and I fall again against the wall. And I break into a full body sweat and I can't stand upright and I'm hyperventilating and I'm thinking to myself, I'm having a stroke. I am having a stroke. And it turns out it wasn't a stroke, it was a panic attack. And that was the first of many. And what happens is when your body realizes that there is a pressure release valve that it can hit when your anxiety or stress gets too high, well, then it continues to hit that. And what happened was I eventually got to the point where every time I saw patients, I had a panic attack.
Oh, goodness.
And what that looks like for me is as soon as a panic attack hits, within 30 seconds, I'm in a full body drenching sweat. I'm hyperventilating, I'm on the floor, crying and vomiting. Uncontrollable. You cannot control it. It is the scariest thing. And as the fear of that situation rises, well, then the adrenaline kicks in even more. And you're spiraling higher and higher into the anxiety and into fear. And your body is going to completely exhaust itself of all of its energy reserves to dump all of that excess anxiety and stress that you're holding. Because if you don't, you'll die.
So you experience this with clients or people in your...
Every time that I sat down to do orthodontics, even on my own kids.
Wow.
So after 5 years of practicing orthodontics, I had to quit. I had to quit because of the panic attacks. It broke my heart. Here I am, 35, because I had to end at 36. No, I was 36. 5 years into my profession that I worked my whole life for, and then I was done. I was able to spend a few more years doing managerial work in my company, and then the panic attacks found me again, and I had to retire completely. And my psychiatrist said to me, Whitney, right now it's panic attacks. Pretty soon it will be heart attacks. If you do not stop, you will die. And I had been kind of limping along for so long, she said, if you don't check yourself into a 30-day facility, I can't see you anymore. So I called my business partner and I said, I'm done. I had that conversation with him and told the family what was going on, my kids, which was heartbreaking, and checked myself into a 30-day facility down in Tucson called Sierra Tucson. And it changed my life. And the reason is because I went through a battery of tests and they showed me how I had undiagnosed PTSD. I was in the 98th percentile for anxiety disorder, 97th percentile for major depressive disorder. I was tore up from the floor up.
Was the PTSD from the abuse or something else?
So the PTSD started with the abuse. But then what exacerbated it was me starting offices and then leaving them. So I started 7,000 patients in 5 years. And what I would do is I would create these relationships with these people, their parents, and then I would get them going on their braces, and I would train the doctors and the teammates in that office, and then I would bring in a replacement orthodontist and step out 15 times in 5 years. And it began to be like I couldn't go to sleep without seeing the faces of my patients that I felt like I had abandoned. And every time I'd go into a new office, I would feel the weight of the old offices. And just that repeated trauma of hello and goodbye, build trust, break it, just was the icing on the cake. So when I was at Sierra Tucson, the focus was to help me heal from my trauma as a child, to help to cure my toxic shame, and to heal my inner child. Now, I write about all of this in the book. Like, I go into pretty deep detail. And not only my own story, I have 12 other men in here as well that I've shared parts of their stories dealing with addiction, depression, all of these different things, codependency. And it wasn't until I was able to heal at Sierra Tucson that I found my voice and the desire and ability to help any man who is struggling. Because I know the fear, I know the pain, I know the absolute terror it is to go to bed at night wondering if I'm still going to be able to provide and protect for those who I love.
I was going to say, can you heal from that?
Yes.
And can you do it in 30 days?
Yeah. 30 days was the start. That was the springboard. And it took more time after that. I'm still healing.
Yeah.
But I would say the lion's share is taken care of because of
How do you know? How do you know that?
Because I can sit here and tell you that I was sexually abused without breaking into tears.
Okay.
Because I can talk about these things matter-of-factly versus having a massive emotional response and a fear trigger going on inside of me.
And the sweat.
And the sweat and all of that.
Okay.
And one of the major treatment modalities that was the most helpful for me was a treatment therapy called EMDR, or eye movement desensitization reprogramming. And so I'll explain it the best that I can. We have a survival instinct inside of us to keep us alive. Let's say, Ryan, that you go through a traumatic experience, a terrible accident, or something that is too much for your body and brain to fully comprehend. So say that I pick up this water bottle. I pick it up. My brain, that information comes through my prefrontal cortex, bounces several times across the midline of my brain, and then gets stored where it appropriately needs to go and becomes a memory if I need it. If I'm experiencing a traumatic experience, something traumatic will come into my brain and it'll come back and forth a couple of times, and the brain will fire off sirens that says, nope, this is too dangerous for us. There is a possibility that we will go into a freeze state right here. You know how when a deer crosses the road and looks and they freeze? That's the freeze state. We have that in us as well. But our brain, to keep us alive, has this mechanism where it will, if it feels something too traumatic, it will take it and lock it up on one side of your brain to keep it from processing fully, so that you can keep either running from a saber-toothed tiger or a bear or whatever, right? The problem is that trapped memory stays trapped, and it turns into an abscess, and it starts to leak what I call poison, essentially, into your brain. And the only way that your brain can tell you that it's sick is by exhibiting signs of addictive behaviors, depression, anxiety, these things that happen within our brains that's saying, hey, something's wrong here. So when you go through EMDR therapy, the woman who figured this out, it was fantastic. Her name's Francine Shapiro. She's a psychologist. But she found that if she's able to light up both sides of the brain while talking about it, it will jiggle that trauma nugget loose and allow it to process and go through, and then she will fill it with positive things where that vacuum is.
Today's episode is sponsored by Eco Roofing. Eco is led by a third-generation Arizona roofer who is also the president of the Arizona Roofing Contractors Association. They offer free estimates and the best warranties in the states for shingle and tile roofs. They love giving back to their community and will always be here to serve you.
So for example, with my sexual abuse, when I was inside of EMDR therapy at CR Tucson, the way that they do that is there's a light bar that sits in front of you and a light goes back and forth. And when it hits this side, they can ramp it up by putting headphones on you and it'll beep. So it comes over here, your head stays still, but your eyes watch this bar, and when it comes over here, it beeps. And then if they really want to crank it up to 11, which is what they did with me, they'll put buzzers in your hands. So it'll come over here, it'll beep, and it'll buzz. So it's firing all sorts of different sensory modalities in both sides of my brain. And while that's going on and I'm watching that light bar, I've got a therapist over here talking to me about the experience. And it's starting to wiggle loose that trauma nugget. And eventually it comes loose and it starts to bounce back and forth. And then it processes. I'm bawling, I'm like dry heaving, emotion. It's crazy, right? But when it's done, it's gone. And your brain starts to realize, oh, he's starting to heal. And now more trauma nuggets will start to come out. And eventually, all of these things that are causing poisonous relationships in your brain will start to go away and to heal. And instead of them being such a massive, nasty experience, it just becomes a memory. It just becomes something that now you can draw strength from because you survived it. And so there was the EMDR therapy that was extremely crucial. And then inner child therapy, which if someone had said to me, Janine, if someone said, hey, Whitney, one of the reasons you're struggling so much is because your inner child is terrified. I'd have been like, get out of here.
Right.
You're ridiculous. Like that's ridiculous. But it turns out it's absolutely true. So, and the way that I discovered that was I was in a group therapy session, and it was comprised of all women and me with the woman's name. And so the way that my therapist wanted to fix this was, he said to me, Whitney, I want you to write a letter to little Whitney, 8-year-old Whitney. I want you to write a letter to him and describe all of the terrible things that are going to happen to him from age 8 to now. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. Yeah. He says, yeah, that's what you're going to do. So I went back to my room and I just wrote pages and pages and just bawling and tears and just like, you know, not pretty crying, right? Just all of these things that are going to happen to little Whitney. And then the assignment was to bring them back the next day. So I bring them back the next day, and he sets up 2 chairs facing each other. I sit in one and the other one remains empty, reserved for little Whitney. And I now have to read him this letter. And as I'm reading him this letter, it's easily the most embarrassing, terrifying, vulnerable experience of my life. I'm in a room full of people I really don't know that well, and I am just bawling and bawling. And when it gets to the end of the letter, I knew that there was anger issues buried in there deep, because when you're abused and you feel that shame turns to anger, and you bury it, and it just like lives inside of you.
Who is it directed towards?
So the rage was directed towards myself, because I felt like I allowed this to happen to me. When you're abused, there's a book called, it's called Guilt and Shame, Masters of Disguise. And it talks about if you're abused when you're younger, how the guilt and shame will transform you into this angry, like it's crazy. But the rage was at me, it was at my abuser, it was at various people who had betrayed me, and all of a sudden it started to come out of me. My fists clenched, like my therapist, a big man, saw that this rage was coming out of me. And so he stands up and he says, "Whitney, I want you to push your fist against my hand to start to like channel that rage." And I was overpowering him. So he's like, "All right." And he hands me a pillow and he says, "Try to, rip the pillow." And I was doing that. So he says, "Stand up against the wall and press against the wall as hard as you can. And just let that rage come out." So I did. I was pressing against the wall. The wall was shaking. The clock fell off of the wall. I'm screaming. And by the time I'm done, I slump to the ground and I'm just crying, completely exhausted, but the rage was gone. And what had happened is I had showed little Whitney that big Whitney was in control, and I was going to keep him safe. And from then on out, I've been good.
Wow.
In regards to feeling safe and in control. And that was a massive part of my healing. One of the things that I talk about, actually I don't talk about it in the book, but there is a bonus chapter that's referred to in the last, is a procedure that I went through about 6 months after CR Tucson. Because even though I had gone through all this healing, my anxiety levels were still really high. Like on a scale of 1 to 10, I would wake up at a 6, and I would function between a 6 and an 8. And when it got to 9 and 10, that's when the panic attacks would start. But I had heard on a podcast, this guy who does this procedure called the stellate ganglion block. I don't know if either of you are familiar with this. So your fight or flight response is a feedback loop. So a feedback loop is when it's like a thermostat. If it gets hot in here, the thermostat reads that temperature, kicks on the air conditioning until it gets cold enough, and then it stops. That's a feedback loop. So when you have a fight or flight response, your brain says danger, danger. It sends those nerve messages down to your adrenals, which then starts the fight or flight response. Well, the pathway, the highway of that nerve response is through a bundle of nerves in your neck called the stellate ganglion. And what this procedure is they'll go in using ultrasound and they will numb the stellate ganglion, like you get a tooth numbed at the dentist. And when they numb that, what happens is your body, if you have PTSD, which I do, your body is always sending that fight or flight response. You can't turn it off. If you have PTSD, that's what PTSD is. It's a chronic state of fight or flight. And what turning off that nerve bundle does is the brain sends the danger signal, but the body doesn't react because it's not getting those signals. And your brain's saying danger, danger, danger. And your body's like, no, we're good. I don't understand what the problem is. And then your brain finally is like, oh, okay, we must be good. Hard reset. And that's what the stellate ganglion block does, is it completely resets your autonomic nervous system to where the fight or flight response shuts off. It turns on when you need it in a healthy way, but it's not always running. And so I went to a doctor in Maryland, in Annapolis, to get that done, who's kind of like the leader of that in the US. They figured it out in the 80s from the Army. And within 30 seconds of him numbing that nerve bundle, it was like someone had turned off a TV that was running on the static channel. Remember the static channel? Gone. And for the first time in 30 years, I finally felt no anxiety, no stress, no anything. Like I felt true peace. And I just started crying again. because finally I was able to feel calm.
What just you saying that, I can only imagine the release that you must have felt having held in physically, right? All those emotions and all of that, even though you had worked through it, it's still there. And being able to like release that, I can't even imagine that, just like that, feeling.
It felt like I was floating. It felt like I was floating on the table. And the doctor comes in and he says, how are you doing? And I'm crying. I'm a crying mess. And he says, I feel like I'm floating. He says, Whitney, I didn't give you any narcotics. Like there's no morphine, there's no Dilaudid, like nothing that would make you feel that way. It's the fact that you have finally taken off that backpack full of rocks that you've been carrying your whole life and can finally feel peace. It blew my mind. So
I'll share really quick. When I went through a period where I was having intense anxiety, then led to panic attacks. So I totally related to that part of your story. And it's your body's physical way of releasing that stress, that pressure, because it can only handle so much.
That's right.
And then I totally related when you were saying that vicious cycle of worrying that it was going to happen again. And it's like a crazy cycle. Anyways, I ended up getting on a prescription medicine and I took it for 6 months. And the way I explained it was it like cleared the fog for me. It made it, where when you have that level of anxiety all the time, it's very foggy and very hard to think clearly because it's clouded with this anxious pressure.
Absolutely.
And so being on that medicine, it like cleared the fog. My problems were still there. The issues were still there, but it was like I was able to handle it.
Yes.
And then when I got off of it, I only had to take it for 6 months. I was able to take those tools that I had learned while on the medicine and use them while off.
100%.
I've never had to go back on it. And I still use those tools today, but just that. So I think for me, I totally relate to that. And that is like the worst feeling. And I have such compassion for anybody in that cycle. It's so painful. There are options, and taking advantage of those options doesn't make you weak. It actually makes you powerful to say, I'm not going to sit in this.
Yes.
I'm going to actually do something about it.
Have either of you broken a bone, needed a cast? Okay. So what did you break, if you don't mind me asking?
A bone in my foot.
You broke a bone in your foot. Okay. So let's say that you decided that you were just going to man up through that experience and not get a cast or crutches or anything. You were just going to keep walking on that. How successful would you have been in carrying on with your daily activities with that injury?
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't have healed properly.
No.
It would have dragged on forever.
Forever, right? So oftentimes people think, I can't get on meds. If I get on meds, that means that I'm weak. That means this or that. It's just a tool, Janine, just like you said. You don't have to be on them forever, but just like you wear a cast for 6 to 8 weeks to allow yourself to heal and give yourself the break that you need, that's what medication can do. And it can give you the ability to step back and be like, oh, okay, I'm not in a dumpster fire all the time. I can see things a little more clearly. I can get some tools to help myself to cope and to manage properly, more healthily. And then if I can, I'll step off of those meds. But if not, I'll just keep going. Regardless, it's not anything to be ashamed of. So,
Yeah, I think there is a lot of shame around that.
Yes, of course
Which is
there
why I
is.
think it's so
Especially for-
awesome that you're here.
Especially for guys.
yes.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that right for a little bit.
No,
Yeah.
just it makes you feel weak.
Now, give me your experience. So here I am. I'm a successful orthodontist who is bearing his soul to the world in my book, on your podcast. What emotions have you had as I have been going through this story?
Man, he just flipped the script on us.
I love it.
The interviewee becomes the interviewer.
I can guess, but I want to hear it.
So it makes me think of a couple things. So on a very small scale, like I was working out with one of my best friends, like every day for months. And I was 40 probably, and wasn't feeling like it was going anywhere. Like, when you lift and you're working out intensely, you want to feel different. Like you want to feel better. And over the course of a couple of months, nothing was really changing much. And I kept feeling like I was having injuries way too much. And you chalk it up to being 40, right? Which I didn't accept. And he kept telling me, go get checked, get your hormones checked.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to because I didn't want, like deep down inside, I think it's because I just didn't want to accept that maybe I would need it.
Where did that come from?
I don't know.
Did that come from growing up in a certain way? Did that come from...
I have no idea.
It's a stigma.
Yeah.
It's a stigma that exists in everyone's minds that if I need help, that means that I'm weak.
Yes.
And I'm less.
Yes. And I remember when I got checked, my testosterone was lower than what a female should have. And I was just like, oh my gosh. And so corrected that path, night and day different.
Isn't it incredible?
And then you realize how stupid was that, right?
It wasn't that it was stupid.
Yeah.
It's just that it was misdirected, misguided.
Yeah.
Just the mindset of if I ignore it, maybe it'll be okay. Or if I get checked, then that's admitting that I'm weak. But now here you are, you're 40, you got checked for your testosterone, it was low, you got on testosterone and you felt better.
Mm-hmm. Night and day different.
And you kind of felt stupid.
Stupid for the limiting belief, I think.
That's how I felt. I felt like as soon as I got on the testosterone, as soon as I started to take meds and I was able to see what my hubris was causing, the damage that was happening as I flew too close to the sun too many times, I realized, Whit, you're human.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're breakable, buddy. Like you can't go at full steam all the time and expect to be okay.
Yeah. You're not Superman.
No, but I thought I was. And I think that that's one of the issues is that we feel as men, I'm not trying to exclude you here, we feel as men that we have to always have that cape on, and to take it off will cause a negative response in our lives.
Yeah, I totally understand that. I think that is absolutely spot on with most men. Mm-hmm. Like I remember when you were talking about some of the trauma, when I was little, I was probably 4 years old, maybe 5. I had this dream that was, I would call it a nightmare.
Yeah.
And the best I can describe it is, think of being a baby and someone breaks into your house and you know what a baby would know.
Yeah.
There's an evil force and a good force, your dad probably, fighting right above you. And it's that intense. Like, it was crazy. And I remember I would go into the bathroom because this was recurring. And I even experienced it as an adult once, just thinking, whoa, that's so weird to have that hit me. And I would go into the bathroom and cry. I would sit in the tub because I was aware enough to know I was dreaming and I didn't want to wake my parents up, but I knew I shouldn't stay in bed.
Yeah.
Like, it was weird.
Yeah.
And I have no idea where it came from. None. It could have been from a movie. It could have been, I don't know.
Yeah. It's probably like some internal fears manifesting or something.
Possibly,
yeah. So when I say that I know people have trauma, I had a great childhood.
Yes.
I can't think of anything significant that would have caused that type of disruption or any type of disruption, really. But I know there's some there.
Yeah.
Always.
It's interesting that you say that. So when I was once visiting my brother in Florida, we went and visited the Florida Everglades. And there's this tree there called a strangler fig. Are you familiar with the strangler fig? It's a hemiepiphyte. I'm a little bit of a science nerd, but essentially what it is a tree that the seed gets deposited at the top of a palm tree by either a bird or a squirrel or something. And that seed begins to germinate and it sends these little tendrils down the trunk of the host tree. Tiny, almost imperceptible. And when those roots hit the ground and then start to able to feed, then they start to thicken. And what happens is the strangler fig begins to encase the host tree to the point where it chokes it out. Now, childhood trauma, I talk about this in the book, is like the strangler fig. Something small, something almost imperceptible can happen when we're younger. But over time, as time goes on, those little delicate roots can hit soil and really start to take off. And it can begin to affect our lives in ways that we have no idea are going on. And so in the book, I talk about and I give it options and opportunities to reflect on a simple question. The question is, do you have any experiences growing up that you would not want your children or future children to experience? What are those?
Wow,
Write them
that's
down.
powerful.
Write them down. Chances are that is a traumatic event in your life that is causing some sort of havoc now that you're an adult. And that's what EMDR is so good at, is finding those little trauma nuggets that have, since something small has now become something big.
And we talked about this too. We know that, she's married and has 3 kids. I'm married and have 3 kids, and we've talked about how I don't know if it's trauma, but whatever.
Yeah.
We pass it on to our kids.
It's generational.
Yeah.
It's generational.
Inadvertently, not even thinking about it.
Yeah. It's crazy, isn't
Like
it?
I was just thinking about like the hard work piece, right? My dad's one of the hardest working guys I've ever met.
Yeah.
And so much so that he would sacrifice sleep all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, the dude ran on like 4 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
Partially because he didn't need as much as many other people, but also because he just needed to do it. And I did the same thing for many years, and then I realized, and maybe it's just because we're now learning a lot more about the value of sleep and how it's impacting our health negatively if we don't have it. And I just thought, man, okay, I need to make some changes and not go that route, because so many things are affected by it, right?
Yeah, exactly. They have, and oftentimes people will wear their exhaustion like a badge of honor.
Yeah.
Right.
I only need 4 hours of sleep a night. I can work, this
And
and that.
you would hear that with baby boomer generations.
100%.
A lot.
100%. Just wake up earlier.
Yeah.
What's the problem?
Yeah. The grind.
Whitney, can you catch us up to where you're at today and how you're doing? I mean, so much so that you've written a book, which is amazing, right? So, but how
I
are you
think so.
doing?
I appreciate you saying it.
How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic.
Yeah.
It's to the point now where people come to me because they know that I'm a safe space. I have countless people who will say, hey, can we do lunch? Do you have a few minutes to talk on the phone? Because they know that I'm going to listen to what they have to say, because I've been there and I've done that. And I'm open about that, which is really rare, to have a man be vulnerable and open about his experiences. But the thing is, I never want anyone to go through what I went through, either as a child or as an adult.
Right.
Never, because I know what that feels like. And I wouldn't want anyone to go through that. And so today, I'm doing great.
That's awesome.
Father of 3 kids, delightful children.
Yeah.
My wife and I have been married for over 22 years now.
Amazing.
We've got 1.5 acres, horses, chickens, dogs, the whole thing. I work on classic vehicles, and I love to cook. I'm a big food guy.
Love it.
But I'm happy and I'm at peace.
Yeah.
And I have been able to work on patience since going through all of this. And I was able to it was maybe like 6 months ago, someone called and said, Whit, I have an emergency. Can you see my patients for me? I was scared. I'm like, well, let's put this to the test. Let's see how well I do. And I saw 86 patients that day.
Wow.
Laughing, singing to the 80s, making jokes. And I had fear that, all of a sudden my panic attack was going to come, but it never did.
Awesome.
I went home and I, told my wife that I was able to do it. And I went and I told my psychiatrist, and she says, Whitney, that's amazing. Don't do that again.
Oh no.
And I was like, well, what do you mean? She says, you have PTSD. Imagine a soldier who has PTSD that you ask to be on the front lines just once a week. Just once a week. How well do you think he'll do? And how long until he breaks apart again? And I said, not too long. She says, that's you. So yes, you were able to do it. I do not recommend continuing to do it. And it was sound advice. It really was.
Yeah.
So am I ever going to go back to clinical orthodontics? No. That chapter has passed. And now I'm at a point in my life where all I care about is helping other people avoid the pitfalls
I love that.
that I fell into,
Yeah.
the abyss that I had to crawl out of. And if I can help one man, then it was all worth it. I don't know if you know this, but men ages 45 to 65 are the highest in suicide rates by a big amount, a large amount, like statistically significant amount higher than any other demographic in the US. It's men who are so hopeless, so full of fear and shame that they feel that the best way out is to end it. I don't want that ever again for anybody.
Let's break that.
There
cycle.
is hope. There is healing. There is a way to get better. It's not easy. It's not fast, but it's worth it. Ryan, you kill it in the gym. I can tell by looking at your shoulders, but you didn't get that way overnight. It took time. It took time to make it happen.
That's right.
And that's what this is.
Yeah.
This is just a process. And it can go slow, it can go fast. You'll have setbacks, you'll have steps forward. But in the end, it's worth it. It's worth it.
Do the work.
This is so good, Whitney. I mean,
Well,
there's
if not for yourself, for your family, right?
That's it.
so much that we could keep going on. But if anyone that's listening, they should get the book. When is it available to order?
Which camera should I look in to say that one right there? All right, perfect. Here, let me move this water bottle. This is my book, Men Under Pressure, A Man's Guide to Reclaiming Mental Health. It is available on all outlets,
Awesome.
May 6th. And so,
Tell me about the May 6th.
yeah, so May 6th is the launch date. And what we're doing is I am discounting the ebook to 99 cents on Amazon.
Awesome.
And so May 6th, please go to Amazon, buy the ebook for 99 cents. You can buy whatever other copies you want.
Yeah.
But by buying the ebook, the goal is to become a bestseller, hopefully, which will then get this into the hands of more men. That's the goal. Get this into as many hands as possible, break down the stigmas, allow the conversations to happen, and let healing begin, because there is hope. It does get better.
Such a good way to end it. Thank you, Whitney, for being with us and sharing your story.
Of course. Are you kidding?
And I just am so excited to see what this book's going to do. I'll definitely be ordering a copy and reading it with my husband.
Thank you. Well, let me know. I would love to sign it.
Thank you.
Or maybe like write a little joke in there or something like that. Yeah. So
Thank you.
Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to the Real Deal podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe, and you can follow us on social media at the Home Selling Team AZ.